going to be covering this new topic. It's called ecological interactions, and we're going to be covering slides 32 to 42. As we get started, if you need time, just pause this video. Please make sure you have a place to write your notes, whether it's in a packet or on lined paper or in a notebook. Okay, so ecological interactions. So we already talked about what the word organism means. Remember, organism is anything that is alive. An organism in an ecosystem interacts with its surroundings in numerous ways, and they interact with both biotic and abiotic components. Do you guys remember what biotic and abiotic means? Biotic means living, and abiotic, because of the A in front of it, means non-living. So remember the squirrelfish that we talked about before. Please look at this picture and think about what are some biotic and what are some abiotic interactions of the squirrelfish with its environment. So meaning, what are some things that the squirrelfish interacts with that are alive, biotic? And what are some things that the squirrelfish interacts with that are not alive? So first, let's talk about biotic, alive. So the squirrelfish interacts with the wrasse fish, so that would be biotic. It interacts with the coral, which is biotic. Even if the coral is no longer living, it's still considered biotic. Biotic means it's either alive or was once alive. So like if you were looking at a tree trunk, that would be biotic. Even though the tree is no longer alive, it's still part of a living thing. Abiotic would be anything that's not alive. So it's interacting with the water, the temperature of the water. If there is any oxygen, well, obviously there's oxygen in the water. If there's any sunlight in the water or amount of light in the water, all of those things would be abiotic. So abiotic is water, temperature, amount of oxygen, light, etc. Habitat. So this word means it describes a specific area where an organism lives. So what is your habitat? So a habitat is basically like an organism's home within its ecosystem. An organism's habitat answers the question, where do you live? So a penguin's habitat would be the ice shelves in the Antarctica. A saguaro cactus habitat is the deserts of the US. That's pretty cool. And that's in the Southwest US. It's a huge cacti. All right, and this term you may not have heard before. It's pronounced niche. Some people say niche. I'm fine with you saying either. So an organism's niche is a description of the role it plays in its habitat. A niche includes all aspects of where and how an organism lives, meaning kind of its like role in the ecosystem. So the niche explains the type of food that it eats, how it gets the food, where it lives, like does it live in a tree, does it live in a nest, and when and how it reproduces. It also kind of explains what eats it, so its role in the food chain too. So it's basically if you were talking about like in our terms, when we say somebody's niche, it's sort of like what they're good at, like what their thing is. Okay. But when we're talking in on a biological standpoint, the niche basically is what it eats, how it gets its food, where it lives, how it reproduces, what eats it. An organism's niche is basically says, how does it make a living? What does it do? What is its thing? So for example, Komodo dragon's niche. Komodo dragons live in the Indonesian islands. They hunt and ambush invertebrates, meaning animals without a backbone. They also hunt and ambush birds, and they hunt and ambush mammals. They lay up to 20 eggs at a time in self-dug holes. The eggs have to incubate for 8 months, and Komodo dragons take 9 years to mature, and they can live 30 years. So that basically explains its niche. All right. So for the questions, you're probably going to want to write down the answers, but since you might be writing your notes on lined paper, you might want to write down the question and the answer, which means you might have to pause. Okay, the Venus flytrap lives in a subtropical wetlands where the soil is very low in nitrogen and phosphorus. This is a description of the Venus flytraps Is it its habitat or its niche? So we're going to say it again. It lives in a subtropical wetlands where the soil is low in nitrogen and phosphorus. It's describing its habitat. Here, it's saying the Venus flytrap is a carnivorous plant that captures insects and arachnids that crawl on the leaves. Although they produce food via photosynthesis, their prey gives them nutrients that are lacking in the environment. They are perennial plants, meaning that they flower every year. This is a description of the Venus flytrap's habitat or niche. It's niche. The answer to 9 is B, niche. All organisms need certain things to survive. How many can you think of? This is just your ideas here. So we need water, we need air, we need shelter, and most organisms need oxygen for that air, but there are some that don't. So please write these down. Organisms need food, water, shelter, and air. And this is our last slide. The importance of the environment. Organisms are constantly interacting with the biotic and abiotic factors in their ecosystem in order to obtain food, water, shelter, and air. So, for example, this beaver gets food by eating plant life. He gets water from the local river or stream, and he gets air from the surrounding atmosphere. He makes his own shelter by building a den out of wood. In what ways does the beaver interact with biotic factors of its environment? So biotic would be anything that was once alive. So it interacts with plants. And I guess the wood that he uses to make the den would be biotic. What about abiotic? Abiotic would be the water, the air, and then that's it. So write those down. So biotic would be plants and the wood. Abiotic would be water and air. Okay, we're going to stop there. Please check Google Classroom to see what you have to do next.